So I just wanted to say at the start of the video, I think given the choice between buying a Kemper new right now or buying a Quad Cortex new right now, I think I'd go for the Quad Cortex. I didn't want to waste your time getting to that verdict by the end of the video. Just wanted to say that up front now, and then we're going to explore kind of the differences between the units and some of the things that I think you might want to be aware of, but I just wanted to put that at the very start of the video. So the price for these in the UK is exactly the same, so £1,450 is the price of the Quad Cortex and the Kemper. But bear in mind that if you get the Kemper, you're going to probably have to buy the remote as well if you're going to be using it live. So that, I think, adds about £300 or £400 on top of the price of the Kemper. Now obviously you're going to be able to buy a Kemper used for a fair bit less than that. I think maybe mine was about £900 when I bought it. You can't buy a Quad Cortex used for less than the new price at the moment. So that's worth bearing in mind. Now assuming that the availability of both of these is similar at the moment as well, you can't really get a Quad Cortex unless you're on the pre-order, otherwise you're waiting and there's going to be delays and stuff. So I wanted to just kind of think about what the units are doing. So the Kemper and the Quad Cortex I kind of see as direct competitors. Now the Helix and the FM3 and these things I think are slightly different. The reason that I see the Quad Cortex as a direct competitor is that you've got the capturing, which is a corollary, a pomegranate of the Kemper profiling. So obviously 10 years ago the Kemper came out and did this profiling thing, which at the time we hadn't really seen much of before. Now we're kind of more familiar with seeing it, but I still think that that party trick of being able to do that is kind of cool and kind of useful in quite a lot of ways. Now let's assume that the Kemper profiling and the capturing are vaguely similar in terms of the results. I don't think there's enough evidence to say that the Quad Cortex is more accurate than the Kemper. In my experience that's not really been the case. I would say that they're both in the ballpark and both can do an admirable job of capturing most kind of tones from like an amp or a drive pedal, not a fuzz pedal. Although actually, yeah, saying drive pedals kind of brings me on to my next point. The Quad Cortex, you can run multiple captures, and so you could have a drive pedal going into a capture of a preamp, going into a capture of an IR, and all this sort of stuff. The Kemper, you're sort of limited to one profile per preset, which isn't necessarily a problem, but it's worth bearing in mind that you can't stack profiles and you can't have dual amp kind of presets. And that was one of the main things that I thought was interesting about the Quad Cortex. If I like the experience of profiling and creating profiles of tones that I like with my real amps or other modelers, I also like the idea of being able to stack those on top of each other or use a dual amp kind of setup where I've got both a clean and a drive. All these sorts of things that I can do with the Quad Cortex because it's got a flexible signal path. The Kemper is semi-fixed signal path wise, so you've got always a rig in the middle and then you can put all sorts of pedals around it, but you've got a semi-fixed signal chain. And what this does lead to though is some seamless kind of preset changes. If you're running things like, if you're in perform mode, you could have 5 rigs which are different with completely different effects and stuff, and you can seamlessly switch between those. So I think if you're looking for seamless preset changes, if that's important to you, I know it kind of is to some people, the Kemper might be the way to go for that. The Quad Cortex, if you're running in scenes mode, is pretty seamless, but if you're running in preset mode you will have the gap that some people find problematic across a few different devices. Helix solved this one by getting rid of one of the signal paths if you find this to be something that's really important. I think the GT1000 is sort of seamless, and there's other examples, but if that's something that you care about, then that's worth knowing. The Kemper delays and reverbs, I would say I prefer to the Quad Cortex delays and reverbs at the moment. At the moment, you're kind of limited in terms of what's available. You've got tape delay, ping pong delay, digital delay, simple delay, and then reverb wise, what have you got? Ambience, which is like a short room. You've got cave, hall, modulated room, spring. Whereas in the Kemper you've got kind of crystal delays, you've got really nice cloud reverbs and stuff like that, which I think rival pretty much any other device. So at the moment I would say if you're an ambient player and are really into those kind of things, maybe the Kemper might be one to look at, just because those delays and reverbs in there are really kind of top tier. and I think you can stack them in a way that DSP probably is not too limiting. And you've got awesome functions like hold functions on there and freeze. So I think the Kemper kind of comes out ahead in the delay and reverb battle. Meanwhile, I think in the drive battle, I would say I think the Quad Cortex comes out ahead here. Now both of them are limited in the fuzz department, but in terms of other drives that you've got, I think you've got a little bit more choice on the Quad Cortex. However, I will say that I think the Kemper Drive block itself, which is I think new, that came along with the latest firmware, I think is probably one of the better drive things on any device, and you can tweak that in loads of ways to get really usable tones out of it. So I think that might be a point in favour of the Kemper. Another point in favour of the Kemper, you've got a looper on there right now, so if looping is important to you, which obviously it is for many people, the Kemper has that, whereas the Quad Cortex, it's not clear when that will be implemented, although they say that it will be soon. There's no real timeline for that we're aware of as customers, so that's worth noting. The other really cool thing about the Quad Cortex is that, say you're on a session and someone says, have you got an AC20 or I don't know, a dual rectifier or whatever, instead of like the workflow on the Kemper where you'd be going searching through for those, you can just bring that up as an amp model, and I think that's kind of the strength, that you don't necessarily have to go fully down the capture route. You can just bring up what you're looking for. So, you know, on these kind of sessions and gigs and stuff, potentially you do want to be quick with these things, and so I can just bring up a dual rectifier there, and then a cab, and then I'm basically good to go, and you know, you can just tweak from there. And I think as a workflow, it's good to have that combination of being able to do modeling and capturing. Although, you know, at the end of the day, I think the sounds that you end up with out of either method sound similar. When it comes to building a preset, you know, if someone said, oh, can you do, I don't know, a Bryan Adams kind of tone for this, rather than going through profiles and stuff, you could just build it from the ground up. And I think that is potentially a quicker way to get to the same result than searching through lots of profiles. In terms of tweaking that you could do to a capture or a profile, I'd say I prefer what you can do with the Kemper, you know, the definition and the clarity and these kind of settings that you've got, as well as cab shifts and all that stuff. Super powerful in terms of being able to tweak a tone that you've already profiled. The Quad Cortex, on the other hand, is fairly limited. You've got gain, bass, mid, treble and volume. So you've got some tweakability there, but the Kemper, actually, when you've profiled something, you can make changes to that take it wildly in all sorts of different directions, and I think it's actually way more usable than the internet gives it credit for. Some of those settings can make real radical shifts. I think it's quite a powerful tone shaping device. In terms of pitch effects, I think the Kemper wins at the moment. In terms of modulation, I'd say they're fairly similar, but you do have stereo wideners on the Kemper, which you don't have on the Quad Cortex at the moment. But I'd say that the main thing that is missing from the Quad Cortex at the moment is the looper, and then the main thing in favour of the Kemper as well might be that kind of seamless patch changes without volume drop and that kind of stuff. If that is what you care about, then I guess you'll already know that, so this video probably won't help you. But those are just my thoughts on that. So if you've got your own kind of opinions, this is not me saying that I think the Quad Cortex is better or anything. I'm just saying that right now, if you've given me £1,450 to spend, I can get the Quad Cortex, and it does a few more things that I find interesting at the moment than the Kemper. And I think possibly, given that the Kemper is 10 years old, are we likely to see something else doing that same job? Is there a Kemper 2 on the horizon? I'd be a little bit wary about spending £1,450 on a Kemper right now, just because of where it's at in its product cycle. I could be wrong about that, but it feels like there could be a new Kemper coming around the corner, in which case that would be super exciting as well. You know, something with a flexible signal chain potentially, or the ability to load more than one profile. The effects, as I say, in the Kemper I really dig, especially the delays and reverbs, so that might be interesting. But that's why I personally would choose the Quad Cortex at the moment. In terms of where we're at in a year or two, I don't know whether we'll find out something about this hardware. Maybe we'll find out, you know, that some people have had issues with it. I know that the Kemper you know, 10 years on, I don't think there's huge amounts of issues. I think there might have been some issues with the Kemper Stage. The actual toaster, I think, has been quite reliable for most people. Again, if your experiences differ, do let me know in the comments. But those were just my thoughts on that. So hopefully that was vaguely interesting somehow. I just wanted to put together that little video because I just had some thoughts on it. I think at the moment I would choose the Quad Cortex if I had to buy one from new at the moment. But you can also buy a used Kemper and you potentially might find that you really dig that kind of thing anyway. They both do some really useful stuff, obviously. Thank you for stopping by. If you wanted to like and subscribe, you could, and that would probably help out. Cheers!